Assalamu alaikum. This is Dr. Amina Al-Din for Muslim Network TV and my program, Critical Talk. Um, Today, I thought we would really tackle the issues of vaccinations and why some communities, and it seems to be some in every community, are running away from the vaccine. I actually have two guests, one of which is online now, the other we hope will join later. And my first guest is attorney Gregory Abdullah Mitchell. And let me say a few things. Um, this attorney is all over Chicago. He's a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois. He's a chairperson for the Leadership Development Institute and a board member of Masjid al Taqwa in Chicago. He served on the board of and provided assistance to many Muslim organizations and many persons. And beside that, he is both, what do they call that, an ongoing learner of both all the issues that are out there affecting us. And because he has done campaigns and tried to support other campaigns regarding this vaccination stuff, I figured that he would be a perfect person to explore some of the pivotal, critical, and sticky issues of vaccines. Salaam alaikum, Attorney Mitchell.
Well, alaikum salam, and thank you for that warm introduction.
No, this and for a sticky, critical, and raises hair when you got some. Uh, for everybody, you know. I was reading a report this afternoon that talked about 73% or 72% of all Americans have at least received one dose. Now, if you received, I think it was Moderna and the other one,
Pfizer.
Pfizer, you had to get two doses.
Correct.
So, having, I don't know what kind of protection one dose provides you, but nevertheless. But then of those totally unvaccinated, 57% of them were white. But then in terms of low vaccination rates, there were blacks, Hispanics, and Asians. And I'm saying, oh my goodness. So it's all of us. Then a further stat talked about the areas and concentrations of people receiving their share of the vaccine. So I was a little confused about that. Um, and what it seems like, even though on TV we see these trucks, these open areas and stuff, they're not necessarily where people can actually receive vaccines. But nevertheless, what are some of the issues?
Well, I think you've touched on one in terms of access, but
Hmm.
I think a number of, depending where you're located within the United States, like here in Illinois, the state government and the state and county and in some place municipal public health departments have done an excellent job in
Hmm.
at least making the vaccines available to people. Here in Chicago, the city of Chicago is even sponsoring mobile vaccinations where they will they have in essence a vaccine bus that'll come with the necessary with the vaccine and medical personnel to administer vaccines to whoever desires them at different locations at different times. So there's progress being made, or at least on accessibility, and once again, where depending, I guess, where you're at. But
Where
I
you
think
are?
the larger issue is the narratives of misinformation being spun about the vaccine and the politicizing the vaccine, analogizing it to your some the human or constitutional rights, when reality what we're looking at is a shield that will prevent not only those who receive the vaccine, but those who they come in contact, to better protect those from contracting this virus that is, for too many, it's lethal.
Well, let's, since you're an attorney, I can plumb your mind for this. People seem to have a serious misconception about freedom. Everybody doesn't have ultimate freedoms. As I was listening to Bill Maher last week, you have stop signs, you have stop lights, because everybody doesn't have the freedom to just keep on driving. You know, I mean, somebody stops to ensure the health and well-being of the other and their own. But what is this notion of freedom that says I don't have to worry about my freedoms extend and extend and extend until I stop them?
Well, I think an unfortunate development in our society as a whole right now is the advancement of self. Self,
Yeah.
it's what is it for me? What rights do I have? And I don't want them. Whether we're talking about guns and the right to own guns, or we're talking about freedom from mass, freedom from vaccines. It's all being focused in on the individual. I think what is more important and realistically, the when you as the analogies that you were sharing from the Bill Maher show, it is really when society has to balance the interests of the whole versus
Yeah,
the interests of the individual. And that's really what the mass mandates are about. This is what the vaccine, encouraging the vaccines, and now more and more private employers are demanding or requiring their employees to be vaccinated. And if we
right.
look at this merely through the window of the how this may infringe on the individual, then we get lost. You can get lost in that narrative. But the reality of it is, it's not. The whole purpose of this is, once again, to protect the whole. We've
Exactly.
seen too many instances that have been reported, no matter where you get your news from, where one individual can spread this virus to all those the people he or she comes in contact, and render many ill, and then and as I said, too often people die. People really don't understand. I believe still don't fully appreciate the severity of this virus and the impact it has on the human body in terms of debilitating organs, more particularly your lungs.
Right.
People don't realize the gravity of the medical treatment you receive, where with people thinking, oh well, I have a little oxygen mask. No, people have the organs, lungs have deteriorated to the point where they have to be intubated with a tube
Right.
stuck down their throat. A
Well,
very
the thing
painful
about it is, it's not just the
experience.
intervention. You have to make the person unconscious so that they don't buck against being intubated, and
Yes.
then you have to give them painkillers to to kind of dampen down the pain that if they were conscious they would feel. But this is a full body um, intruder. It's the lungs, it's the heart, it's strokes, it's the pancreas, it's the kidneys. I mean, and the folks who do survive, um, they're called now long haulers. Let me take a moment here and introduce our other guest. um, Dr. Constance Shabazz. And Dr. Shabazz is well known in the Muslim community, and she is the principal and owner of Health Resources Consultants Inc., which is based in Chicago. And Dr. Shabazz is, I won't say how many years experience, but a lot of them working in public and community health. She has served as chief medical officer and chief executive officers at health centers around Chicago, and she works on getting those people that diamond in the what do they call it? The diamond in the rough called federal qualified status. Welcome and salam alaikum, Dr. Shabazz.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Alaikum
We
salam.
were just talking about folk not understanding the full body impact of COVID. And it might be perhaps that we should go back for a few minutes, well, a minute or two, and talk about what is a virus.
Mm.
And why
Mm.
can't you just take a Z pack or some penicillin and say goodbye?
Well, actually, it's really uh, a particle. It's not a full cell. It depends on functioning cells to actually replicate. Okay, and what
Mhm.
it does is it's like somebody comes in your house. You know, they don't have their own food. They go in your refrigerator, get the food, eat that. Then they bust out and go to somebody else's house, and that's what's happening. It goes from one organism to another, cell rather, and replicates, and it can actually, use the genetic material to reproduce more and more of its little ancestors or children, and it can. But the but the most important thing to understand is that these are particles that can cause a tremendous amount of damage in the body. Okay, it can
No.
be multi-system in terms of its influence, and the more important thing is the fact that it can go from individual to individual, like what we're seeing right now with the COVID virus, the different variants. That's a natural evolution of these viruses. They're going to always replicate, and they're replicating for survival. Okay,
For
and
sure.
so this, and so
The way
as
we
long
do.
exactly, absolutely. So it's already there, and so this transmissibility issue with the Delta, for example, is that we said, well, it's more contagious, and it means that I was saying it means that the amount of virus that was responsible for the alpha was probably much more than the amount of virus that is required to cause an infection with the delta, and so therefore it's more transmissible, more contagious, as you will. And if we don't do the things we're talking about doing with the vaccines and the masking and whatever, it's just going to continue from individual to individual until there's something that stops it. And the vaccine is one thing, the masking, because this only survives within human beings. And that means you have to have either some kind of medicinal barrier or some kind of physical barrier to stop that.
Oh my goodness. So one of the things that Attorney Mitchell was talking about was he doesn't think, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, that people realize that it attacks many systems. And
Hmm.
I had just added on that even if you survive, we got a whole new category of sick people called long haulers.
Right. Absolutely. And so that goes along with the fact that this is a novel virus. Novel means new, and so therefore this is new to the body. And when people are acquiring this virus, it is now we're seeing the full blown effects of it. But because we have never seen this virus in this form, in these different forms now, it may be years before we really understand or see the full effect that it has. As you mentioned, we've got the long haulers, people who are having sustaining symptoms even after they've had, the COVID virus, and even after they've been vaccinated. So, what we're
Yeah.
seeing right now is an evolution of how this virus is affecting us. And we're going to continue to see more iterations of this as we get more and more variants. But I
Hmm.
mean, get back to your point about, people don't seem to understand. I mean, we live in this microwave mentality of society. Like you just flip a switch, this happens for a certain period of time, you turn it off and it's gone away. But that's not the way that these things, happen. And these viruses have not just been around. This is we talk about Kobe, SARS, and all these other viruses that we've had before, these outbreaks before. This is all part of that continuous evolution. And we're going to continue to see these things. And if we don't do the right things, I can't say that enough, to dampen the spread of this virus, we're going to continue to have the numbers of people who are getting seriously ill, ending up in the hospital, and we're going to continue to have this rise in death because we don't want to do the right thing. I mean, when we talk about the comparison with the the flu viruses, remember now we develop vaccines, and the vaccines are usually a couple of years behind. Okay, and so by the time you get that vaccine, it's on to another variant, and so that's why the flu vaccine does not cure or protect you against all of the variations of that virus. But we've learned from that there's this expectation that every year, for those who are smart enough who don't want to get the negative and the full-blown effects of the flu, that we take that vaccine, and we're going to expect that the next year we're going to get another booster or another vaccine. But why we don't apply those same principles to this when we're seeing so many people dying is just totally bizarre. It just baffles me. It's like almost
Well,
like people have
well,
a death wish.
so in talking with Attorney Mitchell earlier, um, he mentioned the fact that there are so many um, conspiracy theories.
Mm.
There, people just refuse to get on board. So let's uh, take a quick break while you all get your answers together. I know you got more answers than I got questions, which is a good thing. And we'll be right back. This is Dr. Amin D with Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. And I'm getting a no, a learning moment from Attorney Mitchell and Dr. Shabazz. We'll be right back.
Billboards are popping up all over the country with an
Our neighbors don't
eye-catching
realize
message.
that Muslims are absolutely opposed to ISIS.
Salam. My name is Abdul Malik Mujahid. I'm an imam in Chicago.
16 shots! No me! No justice! No me!
So how do we bring up the energy which can really have an impact on the world? You need to build bridges of understanding among people, and we need to have America moving forward.
That lesson learned have brought the strength of humanity to America, which is the diversity.
Mujahid Talks, only on Muslim Network TV. Faithfully connected.
This is Dr. Amina Al-Din with Muslim Network TV and my program, Critical Talk. And I am speaking with Attorney Gregory Abdullah Mitchell and Dr. Constance Shabazz. And our topic this evening is vaccines. I want to talk about, I have heard before we get into treatments, I have heard some of the really most fantastic uh, conspiracy theories. I thought the ones about UFOs were crazy, but this has knocked them out of the box. What have you heard, Attorney Mitchell?
Well, it's a host of things. That one, and one is that there we don't know what the side effects are. It's an emergency approval. We can't rely. We got to make sure it's really safe. We got to wait. That it may affect
What
our.
are they waiting for? People took shots in March.
Well, you know,
It ain't killed them yet.
they're expecting an apocalypse. I mean, from this whole thing about be that whether it's affecting their virility, whether it's affecting their, like I said, it compromises their ability, whether or not the vaccine itself is a virus that is going to do us in. I mean, there's a plethora of rationales, and then sometimes when people don't want to go any further, they want to get rested that this is my body. I have a right to do with it what I want to, and you can't impose this on me.
Yeah,
So,
but that's what we were talking about earlier. With your freedoms don't get extended until you think about stopping them. I mean,
well,
your freedom only goes as far as the next person permits.
yeah, but the discussion doesn't go that far. It always ends right with the individual, and therein lies the problem. But let me just interject one point now, as
Please.
Dr. Shabazz was making her comments. It came to when we speak about the evolution of the virus. I think what goes into mind, another theory or comes out when we start talking about the rationale reasons against taking the vaccination, is the actual evolution of this of the vaccine itself, that it can be the harbinger of the virus, and it could cause more harm than the vaccine itself. So, I mean, if these are some of the things that clearly we need the medical community to speak to, I mean, you can't answer every spoof that comes up, but nonetheless, I think it's important that in dealing with those that oppose at this particular time the vaccine, that we must at least provide them a platform for them to share how they feel, share what their understandings. And then the best we can do is give the information as we understand it, as we've learned, and as that we've acquired. And then, God willing, that will uh, help them reach an informed decision as opposed to an emotional decision. Because too many
We
things
have a
are emotional.
comment, and I'm going to ask my producer to put it up. There is more than one way to treat or curb any disease. Vaccination will not stop COVID 19, nor from mutation, nor from spreading it if carrying virus. And then Granny Reynolds says, can you put that up on screen? What is not being said is and emphasized is healthy living, exercise, drastic change of what we eat, and losing weight. She must know me. Anyway, um, I think that all of the things that she is saying, and it's just that we haven't gotten to it, um, about the health, exercise and this, that, and the other. But we know that they're athletes, highly trained individuals with regard to diet and exercise who are coming down with COVID. I think perhaps Let me ask another question before I get back to the conspiracy theories. And that is, do you think if the CDC had let the country know about the SARS and MERS and even Ebola uh, infections, that people would have seen that folk are working on stuff all along, as opposed to thinking, oh, they just started working on it yesterday?
Well, I think your question, the answer to it is right embedded in your question. Clearly, the better informed the public is, I think that would definitely mitigate some of the resistance that we're seeing. Because fundamentally, when we think of the flu, we think, oh, we take a shot and then the flu shot is supposed to protect us. When in the reality of it, it is a defense, but it's not a foolproof defense.
Right.
You start to understand what or more importantly, as that your earlier question is, what is a virus? I mean, the information that Dr. Shabazz just shared was too many of us don't really understand what a virus is, how it evolves, as we said earlier, how it evolves for its own survival, and what we can do to, in essence, combat or eliminate that virus when it invades our bodies. But this knowledge is not known. We just say, oh, take a shot, everything is okay, without really understanding. We trust the medical community says, okay, this is good for me. And when we have adverse effects, because people don't fully understand why, like you're saying, is what people are dying who have or still getting infected, even though they got the virus. Well, that's because they don't understand what a vaccine is. A vaccine isn't bulletproof. It's ammunition to reinforce your own immunity system to fight and kill off this virus.
Right. Well, in the Muslim community, can't speak about other communities. Um, Conspiracy theories run rampant. People have remedies from the Muslim world, from drinking holy water to downing turmeric. And of course the U.S. latched onto that and made a tea with tea and turmeric, so you would buy. We're consumer junkies. um, but so South Asians have some of the lowest rates of vaccination because they think the at-home remedies will work, even though people are dying by the tons in India and Pakistan. Um, oh man, I have heard. Let me see the holy water. Oh, what's that? The drug for animals, Invectin. Yeah. And I'm saying, oh my God, now you're a horse. Okay. But then I realized that people don't know that formulations for animals are necessarily different than formulations for humans.
Right. And let me just say that, some of the doses, first of all, because they haven't tested that on humans enough to determine the safe doses. What people are doing, they're just assuming the more that you take. Like people tend to think that the more vitamin C that you take, the less likely you're going to be able to get a cold. When our body has a set point of absorbing it, and when it reaches that set point, it actually excretes it. So you're really not absorbing, the vitamin. And the same thing, with these drugs, you're taking these medications thinking that the more you take, the more likely it's going to kill the virus, when it's more likely it's going to kill you. And so this is the misinformation that people have about this. And I want to respond also to the person who talked about the immunity. Immunity does not mean that protects you from being infected. Immunity oftentimes means that the effect from the infection is lessened. Okay, So we
Yeah.
have to be very careful. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to build up our immunity. Okay. We have all kinds of cells that in our body that form our immune system. But it's also the food we eat that's part of our immunity, the air that we're exposed to. I mean, the exposure
All
to
of those things.
sun or there or lack thereof. All of these things, enough sleep. Okay, so all of these are part of your immune system and they work together. It doesn't mean that you're going to avoid getting affected, but what we're looking at is that hopefully it helps to mitigate. And the same thing with the virus. I mean, with the vaccine. Oftentimes it's really a matter of trying to decrease the most untoward and negative effects of something. It doesn't necessarily mean that you won't get affected, but at the end of the day, you don't want to die from it. And so that's why it's very critical, yes, to think in terms of our immune system, but not as an end all be all in terms of attacking this virus and protecting ourselves and avoiding death or the long hauler syndrome, as we spoke of earlier. So, but I want to also speak to these conspiracy theories. And one that I particularly, one of the brothers talked about a minute ago is that I can understand because of people not knowing the science that goes behind this, and them thinking that this technology is moving too fast. There's not enough time to determine whether or not this is safe. Well, when they do these studies, they have to have the volume of people to take the vaccine or the medication to determine whether or not they have the side effects or if it, first of all, if it's not going to kill somebody and it's effective. Okay. And what happened because of so many deaths from COVID-19 and so many infections, a lot more people signed up a lot sooner for these clinical trials than they did for some of the other medications and vaccines. Another thing people are concerned about is the FDA approval. And they don't realize that it's not because the medication is not safe or effective. They have all of these different steps that you have to go through for FDA approval, including how fast after the approval you can ramp up the manufacturing. So that has nothing to
Right.
do with the medication being dangerous or not effective. It's just that, okay, so if you're approving it, that means you're ready to make it available to large numbers of people. Okay. And if you don't get access to it, which I'm going to say this about the Tuskegee experiment, that it was not that that those men were given syphilis, they were denied the treatment for it. And see, that's what really gets me about, particularly African Americans, is that you got to make that connection too, that there are people who are counting on you not getting this vaccine. And you saw that.
But on that point, doctors are now beginning, as are some hospitals, they're few in number at the moment, to not be willing to treat people who are unvaccinated, not let them in their office, and hospitals are saying, you will not be the first served.
Well, not
If
only, yeah, but there's some instances where in certain states, and we know some of them, where the hospital beds are full, and they have life
well,
saving therapies in another state, and those
well,
people in the other states that said we're not doing that. We're going to prioritize our people, in our state. So yeah, there's some life and death decisions that are being made about this, and people, but again, people are making these choices. There's still people who are coming into the hospital, having to be right before they intubated, still denying that they even have COVID. So yes, it's
oh, I
a
know.
issue that we have here. But you got to save those who want to save themselves. Let's be honest about it. And that's how some of those decisions are being made.
Yeah. And you got doctors and nurses. I mean, well, hospitals are short staffed because doctors and nurses are burnt out and frustrated. People say, how dare they get frustrated that I didn't move to protect myself? I want them to treat me now, but they're frustrated. And you can't help them with being frustrated. But I want to ask another kind of question. How are we really considering who we're around, what we're bringing back into our homes? And this came up from a colleague of mine who said, I just brought my 89-year-old mother home. I'm not teaching on campus because I don't know what I'm going to bring home. And she already has a long list of of health problems, health conditions. So rather than me risk her life, I'll teach remotely. And if not, I'll take a leave.
Well,
Are
you
we
know,
still bringing stuff home, Abdullah?
yeah. I mean, realistically, that's what we've learned from the Delta variant. It's been reported that the number of virus in the respiratory tract of an individual infected with the Delta variant is 1,000 times more than what it was in the original coronavirus. So, I mean, we're just look at the numbers. If you got more viruses, the greater the potential for you to infect others. And there's been reported cases where people who have been fully vaccinated
Right,
have been a carrier and have infected others.
right,
And when you look at the population, particularly anyone under the age of 12 that basically is can't be vaccinated, and you
right.
look as you, even as an individual who's fully vaccinated, is something I'm concerned about. If I see my grandkids, I have to worry: am I a carrier? So
So
it,
what do you
it
do about that?
well, I mean, once again, it requires us to continue to work to inform people. It's not just about you exercising control or dominion over your body and what comes in or out. The higher, more important issue is how what we can do to prevent you to be an agent that can cause serious health and even death among people infected with viruses that you carry.
Well, then, I mean, but how do we continue to minimize our contact with those we love? Do we uh, not minimize it, but at least we can say where we've been and who we've been around, and we were fully masked? Um, Even though we could be fully masked and bring it back home, what do we do? How do we resolve the psychological thrust that says, I got to be out in the street, I got to go, I've got to go here and there, I can't stay in the house not 1 minute longer, with, I don't want to get sick, I don't want to make anybody else sick. How do you balance that?
Well, I don't. I think there are a lot of people who don't have that choice. Either they have to go out, make a living. They're
Right,
still essential workers. But I think that the best way to do that is that you have, first of all, nobody really knows when they're exposed. You know,
right.
for various and sundry reasons. The person who may be a spreader might not know at all. Okay, or they do know they are, and they're not going to share it. They're afraid, because that has its own consequences. So, I would say if you feel like you're going out into a situation where you might be exposed, your workplace or whatever, then I would just come home and have some mask on. Okay, do the best you can with what you have. Base and act like, as they say, if you go get a COVID test, they say act like you have the virus. In other words, even if you don't have symptoms, you get the test done. Act like you have the virus. So that means all the appropriate social distancing, the masking, and the sanitation. Just do that. And I know it's you feel like you're sometimes like you are being held hostage in your own home, but this is something that kills. I want to be able to come home. I want my loved ones to be able to be in the home with me and be safe. So, hey, that little bit of cloth or whatever, to me, is worth it to be able to protect myself and others.
Well, I'm going to take another quick break for a minute and be right back. This is Dr. Amina Al-Din with Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk, learning from both uh, Attorney Mitchell and Dr. Shabazz, and thinking through some things that perhaps will help those listening uh, to broaden their thoughts. We'll be right back.
Assalamu alaikum.
I love Adam's World because it makes me learn in a fun way. That Adam has a green face and orange hair. I like this song. I like how Adam sings. I like Adam's World because it makes me happy. What? No. 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 And here's Adam and here's Anissa. Adam and his sister. Adam is a boy and he is really smart.
Download the new Adam's World app at adamsworldapp.com and let's help tomorrow's Muslims today.
Alaikum. This is Dr. Amina Al-Din on Muslim Network TV and the show Critical Talk, discussing some of the issues around vaccines, whether to get them or not. And let me give a shout out to Omar. It's I'm getting ready to mess it up again. In Mervectin, I forget the name of the drug. Is Invermectin.
Mm-hmm.
Which goes to show you how many horses and cows I own. I think that as one of the things is the rollout of communication surrounding this virus, what to do, these emergency hospitalizations, giving the medical community time to triage its own care for the patient infected with this particular virus has been very bad. And as a result, people, speaking out loud, which is usually kept behind closed doors, is very interesting because physicians and researchers are not allowed to change their mind when they get more information. And even though treatments have improved, everybody doesn't need to get intubated. The health staff is able to discern between mild, moderate, and severe infection. All of those things happen, but people are still dying. People don't know that a mild or a moderate infection can cause the same kind of long hauler syndrome in you than the severely infected who recovers. What do you think?
Well, it speaks to the problem. It definitely speaks to the problem. And the question is how can we as a community begin to address it? Because particularly in the communities are at risk, in the African American community, in the Latinx community, there is a lot of pushback against the vaccines. And as Dr. Shabazz made reference to the syphilis study down in Tuskegee, it really, we take these bad instances, and that's not saying that they were legally and morally wrong, what was done, but at least we need to understand the circumstances in which it occurred, what was really done. I mean, this particular vaccine project it's a worldwide effort.
Right.
We have some of the best minds and medical minds in the world has offered is working to find the solution to this. And as Dr. Shabazz mentioned earlier, as we if we really understood the process, we would maybe be less hesitant to take a vaccine.
Well, we're still, people claiming that with all the videos and with all the diagrams and with all the conversation, I still don't understand. Just means it's going to stay around in its most virulent state longer. You know, we, I don't know. At one point, do you say stop ignorant?
Well, I think keep it simple. I think
Yeah.
that the main thing is for people to look at what is happening right now, the number of people, or first of all, who's getting hospitalized and who's dying. Just go with the
Yeah.
stats, okay? To me, I would rather take my chances with a virus. I mean, I'm sorry, with a virus, with a vaccine rather, that I may not know the long term effects, but if I don't take a vaccine or not being fully protected to the extent I can with the mask or whatever and social distancing, I may have a 100% chance of death and never finding out what the long-term effect is. Okay. So,
Yeah.
so that's what
But also, many Black and Latino folk live in hospital deserts, which means they got to get in line to get into some of the places that even have ICU beds or have other cordoned off beds. So you increase your chances of not being treated by at least not moving to help yourself. In
Well,
go ahead.
well, I mean, really, you're speaking to the effects of systemic racism.
Yeah.
The lack of access to adequate care. I mean, for too many African American families, medical care is the emergency room at the hospital, and self medicate, self treat for everything else. And oftentimes it is about rolling the dice. Oh, I'm not going to get a vaccine. Maybe I don't have the money to pay to get the vaccine, or you get into I treat myself and I only go to the hospital when it's really necessary. So
Right.
once again, the problem with this virus is, we don't see it, we can't touch it, we can't visualize it. It's not tangible in our minds. And we don't, even with all the stories that we hear in the news, we still are not, too many of us cannot really contextualize what getting this virus means, not seeing the suffering, not seeing the anguish that this the deterioration of, as you say, that this virus brings to the body, and like I say, for too many deaths. So I think the real obligation is we're not going to beat people over the head. I mean, we see that in all facets of our life now, whether it's in Washington D.C. or on the streets between pro and con groups for about the vaccination. As long as we keep hollering at each other, it's really not going to do much good. Is how can we, that whatever information we have, that we can share it, and even if it's something we don't think is credible, but at least allow it to be aired and then vetted, because
But we have public spaces where we can't make permissions like that. Schools, workplaces. I mean, do we give teachers permission to come to school unvaccinated and unmasked? You see, I mean, there's some public spaces, I mean, not just walking down the street, but there's some public spaces where we can't afford that kind of choice scenario.
Well, I mean, from a public health perspective, we've seen many of the public health departments moving now towards mandatory masking. And we're seeing now in the public sector, it's already been happening in the private sector,
Right.
requiring employees to be vaccinated. And that's now happening in the public sector.
Yeah.
And so it's like I said, it's clearly there's resistance to it. And sometimes it's what we may see as common sense is really the delayed implementation of a common sense solution is impacted by political considerations. But
Yeah.
as
Which doesn't make any sense. What is politics doing in the center of this? But I want to shift for the last, few minutes to future. Even though, I mean, we've taken a psychological battering. Lots of people are various stages of depression and cannot get, not because it doesn't exist, but the lines are too long to get any psychological help, or or embarrassed by needing it. One thing, the uh, proposition that Granny Reynolds posed earlier about, what was it, exercise and diet and what you eat being important. And we know that living in food deserts where you can exercise, as long as you stay out of the way, because most of these places are in urban areas of suburbs, in addition to urban areas of cities. So you got to watch the bullets while you exercise. And then is what you eat and what's available to you to eat. Is the food old? Is it of good quality? Do you have a range of vegetables? And I think all of those things are making for an interesting future. And I know that Dr. Shabazz and Attorney Mitchell have been involved and are supporting one another in an effort called Salam Wellness Center. So I want to give some time, not enough time, of course, to wellness, wholeness in the African American and Latino community, and anybody else who chooses to come by.
Well, let me just jump in because this is my baby.
Uh huh.
Last year when COVID hit, it really hit home in so many different ways with me as a physician and having worked in community health for over 40 years, and knowing that the community health program has spawned a number of health centers, and Chicago South Side has been the beneficiary of those health centers. But even with a pandemic like this, we still saw that there was something lacking, that that these traditional models that we're used to weren't really helping people to get really healthy and well. And part of it is because we have an old model that is, you come in with a complaint, we do a bunch of tests, we give you pills or recommendations how to treat your blood pressure and your diabetes, and we do all these things in silos, but we don't oftentimes spend the time to look at what are the other factors that are contributing to that person's state of health. What are their living conditions? Are they, do they have access to food at all? In fact, there was a survey that was done recently by the University of Illinois, and they were asking people who were chronic users of the emergency room, and they said, well, why are you doing this? Why do you keep going? He said, well, we're tired of the doctors telling us that we should eat more fruits and vegetables when there's no grocery store that offers.
There's the answer, Abdullah.
it miles away from me, and for those of you all who have a car, hauling fresh fruits and vegetables just from the cashier station all the way to your your car, by the time you get there, you're out of breath. Imagine somebody who doesn't have transportation, but yet we're telling them to buy all these fresh fruits and vegetables, and they have to get on public transportation or walk with it. So we have an unrealistic model. And so that's why we decided that we were going to target a, a, a community, the Woodlawn community on the south side of Chicago, where it was a food desert. It had 33% of the people before COVID were living below the federal poverty level. That there were high rates of suicide and violence, and all of the things that make for an unhealthy environment, and not just come in and have yet another health center, but one that actually addresses these problems using a different model, a culturally competent model, an integrative model using the best of Western and non-Western medicine. And as you have found, and I'm gonna shut up, as you have found in COVID-19, when so many people were afraid and discouraged from going to a hospital, going to a physician's office, oftentimes we're told to start taking on these practices that we're incorporating as standard of care. So the deep breathing, the meditation, the yoga, Tai Chi, really connecting, making, even though we were socially distanced, still trying to stay connected with other people. In other words, taking attendance or paying attention to the mental health. And so we're making this standard fair, because just like the sister was saying, in the chat, that, good food, exercise, whatever, we tend to do these things when we're in a crisis. We want to make this a standard, building up your immune system before we're in the middle of yet another pandemic.
Abdullah Mitchell, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, the last word was already given by Dr. Shabazz. The reality of it is we have to take a holistic approach to these problems, and to the extent that those that are afflicted recognize the concern and care that a holistic model provides, they're going to, in essence, embrace this more or hope more than they would otherwise, and God willing will lead to, better health outcomes for the community as a whole. So, you can add my name to a supporter for the Salem Community Wellness Center. It is an institution that we need to replicate throughout African American and Latino communities to assure healthy outcomes for us all.
I think one of the things that is important is that for many clinics, the things she's talking about as foundational are often add-ons. And I'm going to ask Dr. Shabazz to put the website in the chat so that our producers can put it on screen. But the model is one that needs to be replicated for all of us, and especially coming out of COVID and the weight gain, whoever Granny Reynolds is. Not because we weren't trying, but there was nowhere to go exercise. So give me a break. This has been a very, very quick 50 or so minutes, not long enough. I think while we're still fighting vaccinations and COVID, we need to team up in various ways to do more about personal health care and try to bring those who lead organizations. What are you saying to your organizations? Those who are practitioners. And I'm going to ask my producers, can you please put that up so that listeners can see it? And it's such an important topic. And the mental health piece, my God, I mean, there's so little mental health care. So we're going to have to find ways to do something. So maybe we'll talk about that next time. This is Dr. Amin Al-Din with Gregory Abdullah Mitchell and Constance Shabazz. who are working hard to keep us informed. And it's, it's up to us to take their advice. This is Muslim Network TV and Critical Talk. Salam alaikum. And
Salam
thank
alaikum.
both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.